Hey everybody, it's the Monty'man, and before we launch forth on this episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart with myself and Chris S., I want to remind you, at the end of this broadcast, I have a very special announcement regarding what is available for you, our listeners, for fun and for free, right here at Take 12 Recovery Radio. And now, here is this episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart.
The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, greetings one and all. Welcome back to another fine episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart with our co-host Chris S., who is with me right now. We do apologize. Last week we weren't with you. We're back on track, though, for another episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart. Now, if you're just joining us, this is really a marvelous book. We're finding out how marvelous it is. The Language of the Heart, a very popular book amongst those who, especially history buffs, in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And these are Bill W.'s Grapevine writings from 1944 to 1970, and it includes how Bill came to organize AA's 12 Steps, first thoughts about the program's 12 traditions, emotional, spiritual growth, and much more. This is really a great show and workshop for you guys that are interested in the history, the rich history of this marvelous fellowship. And if you've never delved into the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and you think, that just kind of sounds boring, let me tell you, it's nothing but boring. We have found it to be not only informative, but entertaining as well. Right, Chris?
Absolutely, Monty. Good to be here tonight. This book really chronicles the structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, how it came about. No one was more influential with AA than Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson was defining so much of the processes and procedures in Alcoholics Anonymous that, to go back to these early writings and see when he's putting them together, it's just really interesting.
So what are we going to do this week?
All right, so we find he's been beating around the bush and he's been, talking about traditions in a very abstract way. What he's doing now is, I believe there was 12 issues of the Grapevine from December 1947 to November 1948 or whatever, where he basically once a month he would write on a tradition. He would explain it. Now, I haven't read these in a long time, but I have a feeling that they're earlier than the writings that were edited and put into the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions.
Yeah.
So if you're a tradition nut or something like that, I think you're going to get something out of this, the proto tradition that he's talking about here in the Grapevine. And after he wrote these, he stumped all over the place to try to get these approved within the fellowship. Basically integrated into the structural process of AA. So with that, why don't we get started?
Yeah.
Why don't we start on tradition one?
All right. Tradition one.
This is December 1947, which is a long time ago, Monty.
Yeah.
I was not around then. So tradition one, our whole AA program is securely founded on the principle of humility. That is to say, perspective, which implies, among other things, that we relate ourselves rightly to God and to our fellows, that we each see ourselves as we really are, a small part of a great whole. Seeing our fellows thus, we shall enjoy group harmony. That is why AA tradition can confidently state our common welfare comes first. This is interesting. You know, in the 12 and 12, there were a couple of steps where he really talked about humility. He it was like step 6 and step 7. He was saying, here's where, you're going to really get humble. And then in tradition 11 and 12, anonymity through humility, is what keeps us. So this is 1947, and this is tradition 1, and he's talking about humility.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. Does this mean, some will ask, that in AA the individual doesn't count too much? Is he to be swallowed up, dominated by the group? No, it doesn't seem to work out that way. Perhaps there's no society on earth more solicitous of personal welfare, more careful to grant the individual the greatest possible liberty or belief and action. Alcoholics Anonymous has no musts. Few AA groups impose penalties on anyone for nonconformity. We do suggest, but we don't discipline. Instead, compliance or noncompliance with any principle of AA is a matter for the conscience of the individual. He is the judge of his own conduct. Those words of old time, judge not, we observe most literally. Now that's cool too, because he's right now he's telling us that that no one is going to punish us for breaking these traditions. What normally happens is we don't get punished. We don't get punished for our breaking the traditions. We get punished by our breaking the traditions. You know what I mean, Monty?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, Chris, that he, I read this and I'm like, he's got to be saying this because he knows that we are extremely judgmental. We sometimes can be so self-centered that we are passing, we're judge, jury, and executioner most often when it comes to other people's shares, their opinions. And, one of my favorite things to hear, and I've been guilty of this myself, is in a meeting, somebody will say something and a person will disagree and they'll try to camouflage it by saying, well, for me, and then they'll proceed to share how that applies to them. And what they're really saying is, you're wrong and my take on this is correct. So we do tend to be very good at judging, and I think he knew that quite well.
Yeah, and humility, like I've come to appreciate the concept of humility. Over the years, it's become more and more important to me, and I can see when I lack humility, when I have characteristics of arrogance or judgmentalism or resentment, when I have those characteristics going on, I'm affected in a negative way. So certainly, people that are expressing that in groups can be harming the groups. But again, we're all on a learning curve here. Tradition 1 is really interesting. It's almost a problem statement, just like step 1 is. Step 1 is a problem statement that we're alcoholic and we can't manage our own lives. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right, that's your problem. And it's not good. Well, tradition 1 is basically saying we have to hold on to group unity. We have to hold on to group unity. None of us can make it on our own out there. There has to be a fellowship. There has to be camaraderie. There has to be people to work with. There has to be other alcoholics in one's life. Now, every once in a while, you'll hear of somebody who just sobers themselves up. Like my father drank for 30 years and, one day he just put the plug in the jug and he never drank again. He was pretty cranky about it, but he never drank again. Okay, I would say that's not an alcoholic.
Right.
Now, I use the book Alcoholics Anonymous as a divining rod, right? Like the book Alcoholics Anonymous says there are potential alcoholics, there's heavy drinkers, there's people who haven't gone down the scale very far, and their ability to drink on a non-spiritual basis will depend on the amount of control they've lost in drink. So there are people who maybe they drank 30 years, maybe they got drunk every night for 30 years, but that doesn't mean that they've lost control, Maybe that was a conscious decision, it was a lifestyle. But what happens a lot of times with alcoholics is alcoholics get to a point where it's just the drinking becomes emotionally and spiritually so destructive that, loneliness and just, self-centered fear and the emotional bondage of self is so toxic to experience that, they try to separate. And the alcoholics find they can't separate on their own. That's what an alcoholic is, right? So we need each other. We need each other. We need to be able to go someplace where there are people like us who can say, "Hey, man, I've been there. I've been there. Here's what you should. Here's what I did. I recommend that you do that. If I can be of any help, I'll help you." And we need a place like that because everything starts with that. Today, everything starts with that. In the early days, everything started with one-on-one, taking somebody through the steps, and then you would bring them to a meeting, right? But not today. Today, your first exposure to a meeting, to recovery, a lot of times is if you're in treatment, somebody brings in carries the message into treatment. If you're really trying to quit drinking alcohol, a lot of people are going to suggest Alcoholics Anonymous. Go there. And there's places to go now. So those places need to be very, very secure and very, very safe. And I think he's telling us to be humble, to not put a bunch of rules, to be understanding of the people in these meetings, and to try to find a way to be helpful. Really, that's what he's saying in these paragraphs, I think.
Yeah.
All right, it says, but some will argue, if AA has no authority to govern its individual members or groups, how shall it ever be sure that the common welfare does come first? How is it possible to be governed without a government? If everyone can do as he pleases, how can you have aught but anarchy? The answer seems to be that we AAs cannot really do as we please. Though there is no constituted human authority to restrain us, actually, our common welfare is protected by powerful safeguards. The moment any action seriously threatens the common welfare, group opinion mobilizes to remind us. Our conscience begins to complain. If one persists, he may become so disturbed as to get drunk. Alcohol gives him a beating. Group opinion shows him that he's off the beam. His own conscience tells him that he is dead wrong. And if he goes too far, barleycorn brings him to a real conviction. So, excuse me, the real governing authority of our behavior, Monty, is alcohol, right? I've seen all kinds of things in groups, and so have you.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody that's just off the wall, not playing ball, and they are alcoholic, they're going to pay the price for their spiritual nonconformity, the group welfare's nonconformity. So it is, we learn, that in matters directly affecting the group as a whole, our common welfare comes first. Rebellion ceases and cooperation begins because it must. We have disciplined ourselves. Eventually, of course, we cooperate because we really wish to. We see that without substantial unity, there can be no AA, and that without AA, there can be little lasting recovery for anyone. We gladly set aside personal ambitions whenever these might harm AA. We humbly confess that we are but a small part of the great whole. And there's another expression of his humility. Monty, I'm going through this thing now in the fellowship. I've got a real change in fellowship, and I want to just talk about it for a minute because I think it's a growth spurt for me. So my first 7 or 8 years, I went to meetings that were just traditional meetings. There was step meetings, and there was discussion meetings, and there were speaker meetings. There was no real focus on recovering materials. There was no deep, in-depth, critical reading of any of the text. It was kind of open groups where you pretty much it was okay for you to share just about anything. So what happened with me was I got inspired by some recovery people that you like too. Joe Hawk and Mark Houston were two of the big ones.
Yep.
And I started a group. I got myself and my sponsees. We started a group in late 1997. And what this group was it was a presentation meeting of the information in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was the one that started it, but pretty soon I recognized that I had to start turning it over to other leaders. But whatever leader there was, they would get up there and they would read out of the big book, and they would share their personal experience and explain to anybody like what is this asking us to do? What is the principle that they're talking about here? And it was educational, right? Now I stayed in that milieu for a long, long time. I was hooked up into big book meetings and big book groups, and that's what I was doing for maybe 20 years. Now I move up here out into the country, and I'm really far away from any big cities or anything. And there's groups around here, and there's a men's meeting not far from here, where there's a group of about 35 guys, and it's an open meeting, open discussion. Well, it's actually a closed discussion, but it's a discussion, and people just share. It's like going back to the 90s, right? But I'm appreciating it. I'm appreciating what goes on in that meeting, because behind the scenes, they're being sponsored, and their sponsors are trying to give them an adequate presentation of the 12 steps. But the meeting is about fellowship. It's all these guys, cutting up. And it's a real change for me. I have not gone to those type of meetings in a long time, and I'm really appreciating it, So I've got to be humble. I can't go in there like, Chris, the big book presenter guy. I'll tell all you guys,
right,
what you're missing. No, I have to go in there, and I've pretty much kept my mouth shut and just enjoyed the meeting. Talk to people outside, talk to people before the meeting. You know what I mean? But yeah. I'm just a member in that group, and it's so good for me. You know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. It's refreshing. Sometimes it is important for us to, for lack of a better term, to be fed. We spend a lot of time feeding and we're told early on in many groups, never say no, right? And we learn that how important service is and everything. And with service also comes the dragon of control, rear its ugly head, and some of our character defects are blaring, right? And we go through all that stuff. We go through the bleeding deacon phase, and then the elder statesman phase, and then the time to, hey, now I really do understand what, easy does it means. It took all these years, and then we can really sit back and enjoy and be fed. That is vitally important. I'm in a group, a home group right now. It is just a breath of fresh air. In the summer months, we do a backyard campfire meeting until it starts raining too much that we can't handle it, and then we move inside. We meet in a church meeting room, and it's just refreshing. Nobody has an agenda. Nobody's trying to fix each other, but people are certainly welcome to make suggestions, and it's received well. It's like, where has this meeting been all my life? Well, I think they were there. I think I've changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, there's so many parallels between us. We're on two different coasts.
Right.
But there's so many things that we have in common. Maybe we're maturing along the same type of lines, and we can really appreciate the group for the group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
So, January 1948, Monty. January 1948, he does an article on Tradition 2. So let's see what he's thinking in January 1948. Sooner or later, every AA comes to depend upon a power greater than himself. He finds that the God of his understanding is not only a source of strength, but also a source of positive direction. Realizing that some fraction of that infinite resource is now available, his life takes on an entirely different complexion. He experiences a new inner security together with such a sense of destiny and purpose as he's never known before. Wow, that's wonderful writing. As each day passes, our AA reviews his mistakes and vicissitudes. He learns from daily experience what his remaining character defects are and becomes ever more willing that they be removed. In this fashion, he improves his conscious contact with God. What a great explanation. Every AA group follows this same cycle of development. We are coming to realize that each group, as well as each individual, is a special entity, not quite like any other. Though AA groups are basically the same, each group does not have its own special atmosphere. Each group does have its own special atmosphere, its own peculiar state of development. We believe that every AA group has a conscience. It is the collective conscience of its own membership. Daily experience informs and instructs this conscience. The group begins to recognize its own defects of character, and one by one, these are removed or lessened. As this process continues, the group becomes better able to receive right direction for its own affairs. Trial and error produces group experience, and out of corrected experience comes custom. When a customary way of doing things is definitely proved to be best, then that custom forms into AA tradition. The greater power is then working through a clear group consciousness. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What a great way to put all this stuff. That is some seriously good writing, Monty. So Bill has to explain that God is in charge and God works through our group conscience.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? How does that work? He just explained it. you know?
Yeah.
It's through our spiritual evolution that we become more and more in touch with the divine, and that gives us better ability to be elder statesmen or informed group members, and be able to help guide a group in safe practices. That's really cool.
I wanted to comment real fast. One elder statesman who just recently passed away, he was a co-host on our show, Marv R. He used to make a statement. This guy, he would just sit back and he would watch. And he had a big burly mustache. And you couldn't tell if he was smiling under that thing or if he was frowning. You just didn't know. You know what I mean? But the guy was such a gentle guy. And I say, Marv, when you share, it's full of wisdom, but you share so little. I said, I'm just curious about that. You've been doing this for years. He said, Monty, there's a lot of power in observation. And I really appreciate that, right? If we'll take the time to put our agenda aside and just listen to where we can be of maximum service to each other, we're going to find where we can be of maximum service to each other, and then we're part of the solution, and we're not the whiners of the group anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. We develop a gratitude.
Yeah,
it's almost an organic expression of gratitude to be part of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and to be watching the things that are going on. It's amazing. So it says here, Monty, we humbly hope and believe that our growing AA tradition will prove to be the will of God for us. Many people are coming to think that Alcoholics Anonymous is, to some extent, a new form of human society. In our discussion of the first tradition, it was emphasized that we have, in AA, no cohesive human authority, coercive, because each AA of necessity has a sensitive and responsive conscience, and because alcohol will discipline him severely if he backslides, we are finding we have little need for man-made rules or regulations. Despite the fact that we do not veer off at times on tangents, that we do veer off, we are becoming more able to depend absolutely on the long-term stability of the AA group itself. You know, that really is true. There's been many times, Monty, I thought something was going awful wrong, and I'm voting against that. That's crazy, you know. And the group conscience will go against me, and it'll turn out to be right.
Yeah,
you know,
it'll
turn out to work out fine. I just think that the weak link in this group group conscience, the weak link is: are you an informed group member? Are you an experienced group member? Have you done any spiritual work at all? Have you done any studying of the steps, the traditions, and the concepts? You know, have you done any of that? You know what I mean? And a lot of times, a lot of people haven't. So
right.
They're not informed when they're voting. But still, I've never seen a group die because of a decision made in a group conscience. I haven't.
Right. Me
so
either.
It says here, with respect to its own affairs, the collective conscience of the group will, given time, almost surely demonstrate its perfect dependability. The group conscience will, in the end, prove a far more infallible guide for group affairs than the decision of any individual member, however good or wise he may be. This is a striking and almost unbelievable fact about Alcoholics Anonymous. Hence, we can safely dispense with those exhortations and punishments seemingly so necessary to other societies. We need not depend overmuch on inspired leaders. Because our active leadership of service can be truly rotating, we enjoy a kind of democracy, rarely possible elsewhere. In this respect, we may be, to a large extent, unique. That is so cool.
Yeah.
So we need not depend overmuch on inspired leaders. So I've seen groups that just have little consciences, and they just change the leader, they change the secretary, and it never changes. The group's been around for 30 or 40 or 50 years, and it just chugs along. And then I've seen big book meetings and literature-based meetings and presentation meetings and stuff that kind of really did depend upon inspired members. And when those inspired members disappear, or other inspired members aren't to follow them, sometimes the group dies. I've been part of a lot of big book groups that have died, but I've also been part of a lot of discussion meetings and stuff like that have, they've been going forever because they're not reliant upon inspired group members. Have you had experience like that?
Yeah, and I used to think, what a horrible tragedy for a group to fold. But if we really truly believe that our Creator is really in charge of this thing and He's the great orchestrator, I don't know. I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world for a group to shut down. I don't know that it's a bad thing for a church to shut down. I don't know that it's a bad thing for a Rotary Club to shut down. Sometimes that's necessary. The book's already been written. God's got our back, and so I don't question it anymore. I just, and it doesn't bother me. We live in a community where there's a meeting at some sort of 12-step meeting in just about every corner in this little tiny community. And I'm thinking of this one group, it's been around long before the traditions were ever written. And then there's been other groups that have sprung up for a few years and then they folded or they moved. But the recovery community here in Lynn County is going strong.
Yeah, that's good. You know, there's strong stuff in New Jersey too.
Yeah.
I think COVID kind of, you know, shuffled the deck a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's coming back. You know, a lot of groups have come back.
You know, God isn't intimidated by COVID. I mean, you know, he's still, you know, got our backs, and our 12-step recovery communities are still moving. And man, you know, if you go back in the history of this thing, we've survived a lot of stuff that a lot of different organizations just did not weather.
Let me tell a story.
Yeah.
So you were saying, and this got me thinking, you were saying you don't know what's good, you don't know what's bad. You kind of refrain from judgment. And there's an old story. It's like a Zen story, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you hear every once in a while in the groups. And so picture like 800 years ago. There's a farmer with a small family. And he lives on a little farm, and he's got one horse. He does everything with that one horse, you know. And this one day the horse runs away, and his neighbor comes over and goes, "Oh man, that's bad. That's so bad. You lost your horse." And the farmer said, "Well, I don't know if it's bad. I don't know if it's good. It just kind of is." Now, what happened was about 2 weeks later, his horse comes running back with like 15 wild horses and runs them right all into the stockade. So now he's got all these horses. The neighbor comes running over and goes, "Oh my God, you've got all these horses. This is so great. This is so great." And the farmer is like, "Well, you know, it might be good, might be bad. It just kind of is what it is." Now, one day his son is breaking one of the horses and gets thrown off the horse, and his leg gets just broken in like 4 places. And back then you're going to be crippled for life, right?
Yeah.
So the neighbor comes over and goes, "Oh, that's just terrible. It's just terrible that your son is crippled now. It's just terrible. I feel bad for you." And he's like, "Well, you know, it might be good. You know, might be bad. It just kind of is what it is." Now, soon after that, a warlord came through the area, grabbing every young man they could find to go into battle, and they couldn't take the son because he was injured. And that warlord goes off to a war and loses it, and everyone's killed. You know, so the story just keeps going on and on and on. You know, that's great. This is great. This is bad. This is good. This is bad. This is good. This is bad. You're right, Monty. Sometimes we don't know what's good and what's bad, especially in this recovery milieu.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Right. That's a great. I love that story. That's a great story.
All right, so let's finish this thing up here. It says, "Therefore, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are certain that there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience."
There you go.
And this is really the only article I've ever read where he explains how God expresses himself in our group conscience and what our group has to do to get to the point where God can express himself in the group conscience. And the first 2 paragraphs of this tradition, Monty, I want to hang on my wall. Anyway, that's the reading for tonight.
That's great stuff. Now we're going to be next week. We're going to continue, listeners, with the traditions, and we may do more than one. We'll see how it goes. If you would like to catch up on these shows, please visit us at take12radio.com. Click on the Recovery Workshops banner, and there you'll find Walking Through the Language of the Heart. You can always download all these for fun and for free, and we give you our permission to make copies of them and use them as you will. We simply ask, please do not use them for any financial gain whatsoever. Please offer them for free as we're offering them to you. Chris, thank you so much for another great episode, and we will see you next week, my brother.
I will see you next week, Monty.
All right. Until our next broadcast, my friends, remember you can email us at take12radio@comcast.net. We are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Hey everybody, it's the Monty'man with a very special announcement. I know that if you enjoyed this show, Walking Through the Language of the Heart, and many of you have emailed us and told us how much you do appreciate it, that you're going to enjoy our other shows as well. We just have a ton of shows for you. Listen, we've been doing this for 18 years now, and it has taken a ton of people working together on a volunteer basis to make this work. You want to see how many? It surprised me as well. Visit us at take12radio.com, and at the top of the page, click on our partners link. That's how many people it's taken over the 18 years to pull this off. And I know that each and every one of them would really be grateful if they knew that you were tuning in. Why? Because all of us involved want you to be able to download for fun and for free what we feel is the gold standard in recovery broadcasting journalism. Now, listen, we have Walking Through the Language of the Heart, Walking Through the Big Book, Walking Through the 12 and 12. We have Step by Step Towards Emotional Sobriety. We have Radio Rehab, The Road to Redemption with Brian Duncan. We have Understanding Intervention with Tony Messbarger. We have the Monty'man's Meditorials, short 3 to 5 minute recovery editorials for you. We have recovery music. We have different download links for you to download for fun and for free. Amazing recovery recording artists and the music sets we put together for you. We have a recovery resource page that is just huge, just a ton of stuff. And then, of course, we have all of our archives listed on all the major podcasting platforms listed at take12radio.com. All of this is for fun and for free. We never charge for any of this. Now, you can purchase copies of our shows if you like, but the downloads are free, so why not download them for free? And tape them, record them, share them with your friends, sit down after a meeting and check them out. This is all available for you by the grace of a loving God and simply by us being obedient to the call of God to share the best in recovery talk and positive music. All available at take12radio.com. I encourage you to subscribe on any of those major podcasting platforms listed there or on our YouTube channel. Listen, I love the fact that we are able to bring these shows to you absolutely free. Why not take advantage of them? Take12radio.com on your internet dial.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.